Welcome to FedScoop TV and our special series on advancing digital government in the cloud. I'm your host, Wyatt Cash, and today we're with Dr. Michael Hansen. Michael's a principal investigator at the Laboratory of Imaging Technology. That's part of the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, which is part of NIH. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So I'd like to chat with you a little about your vision for how cloud computing, and maybe more specifically platform as a service or infrastructure as a service, is helping to improve your IT operations, and how you are seeing that kind of lining out over the next year or two.
Yeah. So in our world, in my laboratory, we work on medical instruments, imaging instruments, and they acquire a lot of data that needs to be processed and turned into images so that clinicians can look at them and interpret them. And this requires more and more computational power these days. And or put differently, to make new things happen, we apply more and more computational power, and this makes it very difficult to deploy these things, because now, instead of just having a little computer doing your stuff, you now need a rack of stuff to make your applications happy or make your applications work. And the way that the cloud helps us with that is that we can now, instead of actually deploying lots and lots of computers all over the place, we can essentially just use the resources we need in the cloud, which is great because it gives us the flexibility to have the resources available, but it also allows us to deploy in many different places without actually going there.
Right.
Because we can rent out these resources, all over the world or all over the country. So that's the way I really see it changing my field, is that it allows us to deploy an amazing amount of computational power, like right at the bedside, right where we're investigating, right where we're scanning patients and collecting data. And that's what's exciting for us.
I can appreciate that. And one of the things that I'm curious about, though, is as agencies migrate their operations to the cloud, it's not just a technical issue, but it's also about cultural changes and change management to get people doing their practices differently. How are you planning for that and helping folks in your department?
Yeah, so there are a couple of different things that come up. I think one thing is since we work on patient data, there's a lot of concern about, and rightly so, about patient privacy and keeping patient data private. And in that context, I think a lot of people in our field have a sort of knee-jerk reaction of, we can't send stuff to the cloud, it can't go out of the house, and we have to be careful. And of course we have to be careful, but I think what we're really working on is analyzing application by application whether or not it's actually an issue. So it turns out, for instance, when we talk about medical image reconstruction, that the computational engine that processes this data doesn't actually need to know the name of the patient or the birthday of the patient or any other patient details. So once you analyze the application, it can be fairly anonymous, the data that goes back and forth, and that helps us a lot. So we put a lot of effort into that, kind of walking through applications step by step and figuring out, do we have an issue or do we not have an issue? So I think that whole analysis process is very important. And then the other thing is getting hospitals and medical centers to think about the infrastructure that you need to connect to the cloud. If you have MRI scanners that, as I work on, or other medical instruments sitting in a hospital, you need to be able to get your data out and get the results back in. And often, in terms of network infrastructure, they're maybe not set up for that, or they're very nervous about doing it, or they may not have the bandwidth and so on. So I think a lot of education is needed, and to help people plan what it actually is that they need. So if you build a hospital, maybe you should think about, what's your network bandwidth going in and out, because we may need to leverage these resources as opposed to just, where am I going to put my data center in the building, because it may actually not be in the building.
And as you talk about hospitals and other researchers and the individuals out in the public that are taking advantage of some of your research efforts and so forth, can you talk about how you see the cloud advancing the kinds of services or the capabilities that you might not have been able to do before the cloud?
Yes, again, this is one particular area, just to give an example, that we work on a lot is dealing with patient motion. So often, if you've ever if you've ever tried being in an MRI scanner, you know you have to lie very still for a long time. It's very difficult, and patients have a hard time doing that, and children especially have a hard time doing that. I know that I can't get my kids to sit still for more than 15 seconds at a time. So, so what we're able to do is to, instead of putting that burden on the patient, so to speak, to deal with that, to hold their breath, to do a bunch of other things to comply with the exam, we can let the computational stuff take care of that.
Interesting.
And that enables us to, for instance, scan a child that would otherwise have to be anesthetized to get an MRI without being anesthetized, because they don't have to hold their breath, they don't have to comply, they just have to be watching a movie, for instance, which usually you can get them to do. And so this is where I really see it actually making a difference in patients' lives, that we can make it a better experience for the patient in a way that's transparent. You know, you just go in, you get your scan, you don't have to hold your breath, you don't have to do any of those things, because we're kind of dealing with all of that computationally. So this is where I really see that we can, it's not just some quirky technique, but we're actually making it a different experience for the patient. That's nice.
That's a great example. Lastly, if you could change a couple of things that would help in the accelerate the adoption of cloud computing, what might they be?
Well, I think it goes back to this this education piece, right? That it would be one thing that would help a lot is if, from a leadership perspective, that we don't that it's not the first reaction to say, if we're dealing with patient data, it can't go out of the house, for instance, or we can't leave the building, or like that there is a different sort of, that we remove some of the mechanics that's in that way of thinking, so that we try and stop and think and say, well, actually, is it really that bad? Right? Do we really have an issue here? And if we do have an issue, how do we deal with it in the best possible way? And then for both people in like the research role like me, but also vendors that provide these services, that they come up with ways that are more bulletproof in terms of sending patient data back and forth and stuff, so that we can that everybody can be more comfortable and more at ease with using this sort of technology. I think if people felt more comfortable about it, it'd be a little bit less anxiety about diving into these new techniques.
Well, Michael Hansen, thank you so much for coming by, sharing some of your insights with you, and wish you continued good luck as you continue to push that envelope.
Yep, thanks for having me.
I'm Wyatt Cash with FedScoop TV. Thanks for watching today.